You're listening to For the Republic, a love letter to Star Wars animation.
The sixth episode of The Bad Batch Season 2, titled Tribe, steered the story of this season in the right direction after back-to-back episodes where it took a bit of a backseat to focus more on the fun adventure of the week aspects of this series. We got the return of the Wookiee Jedi youngling Gungi, first introduced in the Clone Wars Gathering arc a decade ago, and saw the Batch travel to Kashyyyk to return the young Wookiee to his home planet. While the return of my Wookiee son was one of the things I was most excited about this season when he first appeared in the trailers for Season 2, this episode packed an emotional punch, crafting a story filled with heart and focusing on how war and chaos impact the life of a child, but also made some connections back to stories from the Clone Wars we never got to see brought to life on the small screen, as we made our way back to the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk. When the Clone Wars was first cancelled back in 2013, there was at least 2 more seasons of unfinished story arcs that never saw the light of day. Many of these stories ended up being released either as unfinished animatics or adapted into different forms of media, such as the beloved Dark Disciple novel that adapts one of the arcs that never made it to television. While we eventually did get Season 7 of the Clone Wars that brought 3 of these arcs to life, many of them still only exist in the form of animatics, concept art, or descriptions from the show's creative team, though Lucasfilm Story Group does consider all of these quote-unquote legacy arcs to be canon stories. One of these arcs focused on Clone Force 99 teaming up with Yoda on a mission to, you guessed it, Kashyyyk. This would have added context to Yoda's line from Revenge of the Sith about his good relations with the Wookiees. In this arc, lore would have been added to how the trees of Kashyyyk are sacred to the Wookiees, there would be a battle against enemy Trandoshan forces, and the Wookiees and the Batch would have rode on giant cat-like creatures. Sound familiar at all? Yes, many of the themes of this Bad Batch episode were taken from these stories that were never finished, more than I even remembered when I started the research for this project. However, the episode makes it clear that the creative team were not simply moving that planned Clone Wars arc into the story of the Bad Batch, as many lines in the episode reference the events of that arc, fully bringing it into canon while also telling a new story on Kashyyyk with familiar story beats. After the Batch rescues Gungi from his droid captors, members of the Batch remark how it had been a while since their last visit to Kashyyyk, very likely a reference to these legacy episodes. Echo also brings up to the group how the Wookiees were their allies for years during the Clone Wars, when choosing to help protect the Wookiee tribe against the Empire and their Trandoshan allies. And we get fun little bits in this episode like Hunter and Wrecker speaking Shriwook, showing their familiarity with the Wookiees and the experience they have fighting alongside them. And then having the added bonus of writer Matt Miknovitz being the one to pen both of these stories. All these aspects made the Batch's trip back to Kashyyyk so much more meaningful to me, not just because I love the planet and the Wookiees, and especially my long-lost beloved Jedi Wookiee son, but because it made a revisit to a familiar planet feel new and fresh, something which I feel happens quite a bit whenever we get a new story on Kashyyyk. Adding the spirit of the Bad Batch series to those unfinished Clone Wars stories, I felt led to a perfect combination, as this was another favorite episode of mine. Choosing to make the heart of the story be the relationship between Gungi and Omega, 2 children whose homes were taken from them and lives forever changed by the war, and the transition to the Imperial era, took this episode from fun fan service featuring a long-lost Clone Wars character to truly powerful storytelling, reinforcing the themes of the season's first 3 episodes of how the galactic transition to the reign of the Empire has impacted everything we had known about this universe before. Getting stories of pre-existing characters working off the eternal kind-heartedness of Omega have consistently been home runs for this series, be it Hera, AZ, Fennec Shand, and her bond with Gungi was no exception, probably being my favorite of the bunch. This episode reminded me why I fell in love with this series to begin with, because when this show hits, it really freaking hits. I have enjoyed the Bad Batch Season 2, but I felt like the narrative of this series was in danger of becoming stuck, after what felt to me like a step backwards in where we were going with the story. But now I feel like we're getting back on track here. Tribe was a beautiful episode, one of my favorite episodes of the Bad Batch. Bringing elements of the Clone Wars legacy projects into the backstories and themes of this episode, giving us back Gungi after all this time, and continuing to show why the heart of Star Wars animation is something that can't be rivaled in any other form of Star Wars storytelling. Thank you guys for checking out this video. If you enjoyed what you saw, we have a podcast on this channel called For the Republic, a love letter to Star Wars animation. We are currently going through the Clone Wars chronologically, and we are covering all the new shows as they air. We are doing our weekly recaps of the Bad Batch right now. Thank you for watching this, and may the Force be with you, always.